How do I start this? Ladies with gentle hands, welcome to Talk to episode 1. I'm here with Hunter Cruz. I had to edit that part out where he said his name, like what he does, because he said something really controversial, and I don't want that on my podcast. So, anyways, I'll cut back to it now. Okay, so first of all, what is a calling in the Bible?
Um, well, I'm pretty sure a calling in the Bible is like an idea that God has a purpose or a role for someone. Like he's giving them a task, giving them some type of
Mm,
mission, an invitation or an assignment to faith, or to contribute to God's plan.
mm. Yeah, it's kind of like often seen as like a divine purpose that aligns with His will, like an individual or a group. You know what I mean?
Mhm. I get what you're saying.
Yeah, there's like a bunch of types too, like general callings, vocational callings, personal callings, and ministry callings. So like a bunch of that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and a general call into faith, is a call to all people to come to faith in God and live according to His will. Like for example, Jesus calls everyone to follow Him and be a part of His kingdom in Matthew 4:19.
Mm.
And I don't really know anything about. What about a personal calling, dude? What do you know about a personal calling?
It's like when like God like calls you as an individual for a specific purpose. Such as
Oh,
like Jeremiah's called to be a prophet before birth. You know.
interesting.
Yeah.
So like like one person's calling to do their own specific thing. Is
Yeah.
that and like a
Exactly.
calling to serve? Like some people are called in various different ways, in like leadership roles, teaching to help those in need. Like for the Apostle Paul, for example, speaks of being called to serve and minister to others. And I feel like that's just known. Calling to holiness. That's pretty. All believers are called to live a life of holiness and righteousness, reflecting God's character in their daily lives.
Mm. How do we recognize a calling?
How do we recognize a calling? People recognize a calling through prayer. Prayer is one of them, seeking God's guidance through prayer, asking for things, clarity, wisdom. They could be asking for direction from God, and it can align your heart with God's will and provide peace about path you should take. You know.
What you got yourself giggling about, sir?
Oh, nothing, 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 nothing. I'm very thirsty. Nothing.
Okay, I'll wait.
Okay, all right. Back to where we were.
I forgot where we were, low key.
How does one discern God's calling? Okay. They also can do that through scripture. Study the Bible. It provides insights into God's character. Promises and general will for believers. Reading, reflecting. Really taking in scripture. Listening at church. Can help understand how God might be guiding you.
Yeah, I
And
know what you mean.
self-examination. You can reflect on yourself. Your talents, what you've been given.
Yeah.
What type of experiences you've been through. Just see how these things have affected you as a person, how God has done these things for you, or use your natural abilities to guide us as a person towards His calling. And you can also counsel others, counsel from others, seek advice from like a pastor, anybody like church related, spiritual mentors, pastors, mature Christians. They can offer valuable perspectives and help you discern what you're feeling, your aligns with the Bible.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Like in Romans 12:4-8, it speaks about how different gifts are given to each believer. And so it's like how a person's calling aligns with their natural talents and abilities. Like how
Oh, interesting.
yeah, like how Moses was initially hesitant and like full of self-doubt, but he was like ultimately obedient to get his people out of Egypt. He said, "Let my people go." And then they made a whole they made a whole movie about it. It's pretty good, bro.
All right, next question.
What does it mean to be called to ministry?
Oh, being called to ministry means that individual feels a divine and compelling sense of purpose to serve, his people, his community, and really advance God's work, in different ways, and the Christian faith, involve different roles, pastors, you have like a divine initiative, a call to ministry, understood as initiated by God. It can involves a sense of being chosen or directed by God to serve in a specific, area, or put yourself in a certain capacity of speaking about God, or having a purpose and mission. Excuse me. Excuse me. Excuse me. A calling, usually comes with a clear sense of purpose, a mission. You can involve preaching the gospel, providing pastoral care, leading a congregation, or engaging in, social justice and like community service. Those can align with advancing, God's kingdom, and meeting the needs of others. Confirmation, often a call to God's ministry is, confirmed through various different ways, personal conviction, affirmation from others in the faith community, in alignment with, person's gifts and personal talents and passions. Confirmation can come through a prayer, mentors, pastors, counseling from higher Christians, a recognition of one's ability and just readiness, and preparation and training. Being called to ministry, often involves preparation, and a sort of training. This can include, education, seminary, or theological studies. That's something that's really needed whenever you're called to, ministry. And, it can be all kinds of different things, experience and mentoring, just, if preparation just equips an individual with, the knowledge they need to do this, and the right character they need to be effective for ministry. And, they have to go through a lot of sacrifice and service. A ministry calling is a commitment to serve others, not in a selfish way, give back selflessly. This might mean, sacrifices, time, resources, personal comfort. It requires a willingness to put the needs of your community and the people ahead of you, for God. And spiritual growth. Oh, I dropped my water.
No.
Spiritual growth. Spiritual growth. Those called to ministry, continually grow in their own spiritual life. Nobody's perfect. Everybody grows. It includes personal devotion, their praying life, living a life that reflects the Christian life of values. Like I've met, all kinds of different pastors, each of them constantly growing and, growing in their own way, becoming better people, becoming better with God, stronger with God's connection, and just, like that. And, what else do you have? What other questions do you have?
Our last question is, what challenges can accompany a calling? Like doubt or fear, those type of like challenges.
Like I said, personal sacrifice is probably a big one. Calling, it requires personal sacrifice. Time away from family, financial sacrifices. Personal comfort. You have to give up things like, if you're an alcoholic, you can't be doing all that. You can't, be smoking crack and stuff. If you're, trying to be a part of the ministry, you gotta meet God's demands, and you have to really be that person for your community. And you just have to balance, the demands of the ministry and with personal life, and it can be challenging. It's with a calling, and it's very straining emotionally and spiritually. For ministers frequently encounter, emotional and spiritual challenges, dealing with grief, conflict, burdens of others. You're having these people talk to you, confess to you. You're having all these things, that just, it takes a toll on somebody, the responsibility of caring for others. And, the spiritual well-being can be taxing and, lead to a burnout, if you don't take care of it properly, And, criticism and conflict, they may face criticism, from within their congregations or, other communities. There's, You know, you got atheists, you got people who don't believe in this, people who don't agree with the church. You know, you've got, you know, it could just be rough, you know, handling with the dissent and criticism, you know, but you have to be graceful. You can't
Yeah.
lash out, you can't do this, you can't do that. You know, maintain a positive and constructive attitude, you know, and be there for your community. And, you know, work-life balance, you know, that's just another big thing, balancing the ministry and personal life, like I said before, you know. But you know, people need to balance, you know, professional responsibilities and personal needs along with the ministry, and it could just be a big challenge. And you know, another big thing is the spiritual warfare that most ministers go through, you know, spiritual attacks or opposition, you know, internal doubts, external conflicts, discouragement, you know, staying spiritually resilient. And you know, this stuff is just crucial that you need to really stay ground in the type of work that you need to do, the type of mission that you're there for God. And yeah, that's really all the conflicts that you'll mainly see commonly. You have other stuff like, you know, there's people who go through, you know, integrity, you know, expectations, you know, it's just, you know, but those are just the basics of kind of the challenges you can expect when accompanying a calling, you know.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah. Well, that's all the time I have for today. Thank you for thank you for listening to Talk to.
I think God just called to me.
I don't think he did, bro.